All right, guys, done a good bit here in the shop, getting things cleaned up, rearranged. I ended up going back through this bike, had to redo the wiring harness. I had a hiccup. I'll probably throw that clip in here. To the rear switch, and then from there to the tail light. Why? I have power, everything's good. Why does that keep happening? But anyway, so our gauge works. Turn signal. Only thing that I don't have though is I got to get a new flasher relay, because since it's not getting the adequate power, because this is LEDs with, whoop, hang on. There we go. Headlights. High beams work. Brakes work. I do have to bleed and get a brake line yet, but we have all the electrical stuff good. We're just gonna go ahead and get some gas, try to rig up some kind of tank, take her outside, and hopefully test fire this thing. See if she'll start. Payson has been helping me out a little bit because I'm pretty new to two-strokes, and went ahead. Luckily, my pap actually had this laying around. Went ahead and did 32-to-1 gas oil ratio. Went ahead and threw it in there. Got to go get a fresh tank of gas. And then she should be pretty close to ready to fire. The only thing I might have to look into, though, is because when it's in gear, I can still push it. So I'm curious if the clutch isn't actually grabbing the way that it's supposed to. I might have to go through and play with the adjustments and things like that, because I might be able to show you guys here. So this should be first gear. I can hear the transmission moving, but it's not, doesn't have a whole lot of resistance to it. So I'm thinking the clutch might need adjusted or need some play. But yeah, we're getting there. She's getting closer and closer. I'm hoping I can have this thing running here soon, and then I can worry about getting her on the street. Everything should be good enough to get this thing on the street. I just have to get my seat, which I found a guy on eBay that sells it. There's a cafe style seat, which I'm hoping it should come back far enough to cover most of this. Maybe at least just cover this little clip. Got that off Roadkill. That works. It's usually for like spark plug wires. Use a couple zip ties to separate them and keep them flat. But yeah, we went through. I had to redo pretty much the entire wiring harness again to get it in usable condition. But yeah, let's go ahead and get some gas and see if she'll fire. All right, guys, don't judge a book by its cover, but I had a petcock laying around. Went ahead and just put it on this can. Basically made like a little bucket. Hooked up our fuel lines. We're gonna go ahead, I already tested it, it doesn't leak, but we're gonna go ahead and throw some fuel in it. See if we can get these carbs primed and see if she'll fire. Rig that I All right, guys, well, we're back in the shop. I'm currently sitting on the floor, but trying to diagnose the bike. So I went to double check the plugs. I'll have to do something about the fuel lines. I don't think it's pulling fuel. I think it's catching air because, I don't know, something didn't seem right with the carbs. So I'm going to try to look over them again. The other thing that I have to do is I'm trying to figure out the spark situation. So for some reason, the coils are ground off of, so there's 2 brown and 2 orange wires. The 2 browns go to power, 1 orange goes to a gray ground, and 1 goes to an orange ground. So apparently the orange isn't actually grounding out. So I'm trying to look here at the AC generator. So the orange wire hooks up here, the gray wire hooks up here, and then the point system, you can see these gaps here are different, and that's usually what sends spark to either cylinder. But for some reason, again, this orange one doesn't have, it's not, I guess it's not grounding. I'm trying to kind of diagnose this on the fly here, but if I crank the system, you can see everything move, but again, there's no grounding, at least I'm pretty sure that's what it is, coming out of this, so I'm not 100% sure what's going on, because if I flip-flop the, you can see 1 orange, 1 gray, if I flip-flop those, then like right now I'll have spark in this cylinder and then I won't have spark in the other. So when I flipped it, it did the same thing. I have spark in the other cylinder, not this one. So the orange is clearly our problem. So I got to try and diagnose this. So we're going to do some research, talk in some forums, see what we can find, but this is where our problem stems. Holy cow, guys. So this has been a crazy couple hours. I've been messing with this for a minute and I could not get spark on the other cylinder. So I finally figured, screw it. I took apart this side because the orange wire up here is the one that's giving us problems. So I took all of these connections apart, sprayed some electronics cleaner on it, put it back together. Guess what? We have spark. If I would have just did that last night, I probably would have had our problem figured out. But next thing on the list now is I have to rig up the fuel system again, or the makeshift fuel system. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to test this. Now, real quick, there is another thing that I did notice that's wrong, but I'm hoping that it holds up for a little bit, because I noticed for some reason my neutral light stopped working. I have everything hooked up. Nothing should be wrong, but it just stopped working. Well, I found out that the wire was crimped because apparently I got pinched in here. Apparently when I put the cover on, I had it laying here and it pinched it. So I think it finally broke. So I resoldered it, put a new piece on, found out that the neutral switch cover, focus, is broken. So I'm gonna order a new one of those. You can see it's cracked here. That lower section on this side's missing. So I'm gonna order a new cover. So I think that's why that stopped working. But we're gonna rig up this fuel system and see if we can get her to fire again, because I put some new fuel lines on it. I got clamps, so now they're not leaking, because I did notice the carbs were all wet on the top. I can't really see that one very well. Focus. But I got clamps on them. So we're gonna rig up our makeshift fuel system again and give her a shot. All right, guys, so after a good bit of tinkering, I ended up having to go through, couldn't get fuel in the system. Couldn't figure out why. Well, long story short, I pulled the bowls off to see if fuel was getting in the bowls, but just not coming through the jets. Fuel wasn't going in the bowls. Well, after I looked at it, ended up being in both carbs. So there's dual floats, and on each float, there's a pin. Well, that pin hits a flange that controls the needle valve. Well, I had one of the floats in each carb flipped. So that meant that the carbs weren't getting fuel because the needle valve was shut. Flipped everything around. The bowls have fuel in them. Let's get her to fire up. Let's see what she does. Choke. That felt great. I have to charge battery. I think the voltage might.
Mm-hmm.